member, Janet Ayers. Janet, we're pleased that you've joined the board. Janet is president of the Ayers Foundation. She's chairman of Centerstone of Tennessee and has been very actively involved in a lot of other community organizations, United Way here in Nashville, also previously president of the United Way of Unicoi County, and chairman of the Unicoi County Economic Development Board, chair of the Unicoi County Chamber of Commerce. So we're certainly pleased to have Janet, and a good addition to the board. Janet, appreciate you joining us. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. We are going to remove two items from that agenda, item 3G and H. So items 3G and H are going to be removed from that agenda that's been printed. We also have on the consent item here approval of minutes of our last three meetings, April 20th meeting, and then a teleconference on May 16th and a teleconference on June 22nd. Do I hear a motion that we approve the minutes in the agenda? Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the action items on first reading. First item is the State Board of Education Master Plan. Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is first draft of the master plan. It was first presented to you at the 3 months ago at our workshop. The comments and suggestions that you made at that workshop have been incorporated, and they're highlighted in this draft. The master plan draft builds on the strategic plan that the department is working from and adds some areas. The priorities are to expand students' access to effective teachers and leaders, to expand families' access to good schools, expand educators' access to resources and best practice, expand public access to information and data, and adds a section, sets achievement targets and measures success. We've been working for about 3 years on the targets and trajectories for college career readiness, as the way we would measure our success, so they've been incorporated here. As you read through this, we're still working on a couple of areas. You see on page 6 the proposal to add the 25% interim benchmark and 50% target for 2020 of students meeting all 4 of ACT's benchmarks. That is a first entry. We're also, Rich and I had talked this morning, and we're going to be reviewing the post-secondary access and success numbers and finishing on page 8 the interim and the proposed targets as we bring it back to you for final consideration in October. With that, I'll conclude my comments and take any questions.
Any questions, comments for Gary on the first reading here of the master plan? Gary, I think that just one comment as we look at some of the numbers that were places where we need to add. I think we also need to look at a couple of areas whether we've been aggressive enough in establishing our targets. I'm particularly concerned that when we look at a number of the items on college and career readiness, that we're letting the difference between the NAEP results and the TCAP results spread get larger than they are at the present time. And you know, I understand how we've gone about establishing those NAEP targets, and it's pretty aggressive, but we're expecting phenomenal results with TCAP over this period of time, and I think we ought to be expecting phenomenal results with NAEP also, and I think we need to examine whether it's appropriate for that spread to increase from where we are at the present time. But that, and also looking at some of the numbers on the post-secondary things, I think we need to look at before we bring it back for second reading.
Will do.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve the master plan on first reading? Got a motion, second? Got a second? Somebody? I hear a second. Got a second. Okay. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move to item 2B, which is the preliminary list of textbooks. Morgan's here. Good morning.
Okay, now, okay. You have before you the preliminary list of textbooks for Bedford Reading K-8. The publishers have submitted the textbooks. The Textbook Commission has approved the submission as a preliminary list. Currently, as we speak now, we have a team of reviewers of teachers who have been trained extensively in the Common Core. We had a 3-day training in June for those reviewers to look over the Common Core standards and the publisher's criteria, and they are reviewing those books as we speak. They will be coming back next week to recommend to the commission the number of books that meet the criteria. And then in October, the commission will meet and formulate an official list, which I'll bring to you in that October meeting.
Okay. Any questions for Morgan?
Yes.
Do we, as part of our review, do we ask if these providers' product come in digital format?
Yes, most of the submissions have an ebook component, and right now, a lot of the publishers, if you buy a print book, you get the ebook free. We have a couple of submissions that are completely online or digital content. And so it's up to the local system to decide which format they want to use.
Morgan, is it it's fair to say, though, that publishers, well, it's true that you get the ebook for free if you buy the printed edition. It's fair to say that we have generally been displeased with the pricing on ebook alone. If you want to do the reverse and just buy the ebook but not the printed book, we're not getting a very good bargain on those, right?
Right. And just this past week, we had our national conference here in Nashville, and that was the ebook and the vetting of the digital content was the topic. And the publishers are aware of the pricing and what we feel about the pricing. We had 18 of the 26 adoption states present.
This is an ongoing area of emphasis for the department because of the pressure that we feel from school districts. School districts feel very helpless when it comes to textbook adoption and the cost of books, and it feels like textbooks are moving at a much slower pace than the rest of the world. And so that's a huge area of emphasis. I'd also just want to commend Morgan and his team for the process that they've led around Common Core. We have been, at the request of districts, much more engaged in trying to ensure that the textbooks truly meet the standards, the Common Core benchmarks. And that has taken a lot of time and energy and work, and I hope will lead to better textbooks being adopted this coming year.
Okay. Other questions, discussion? Okay, is there a motion that we approve the preliminary list of textbooks on first reading? Got a motion, second? Got a second. Any questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Next item is teacher and principal evaluation policy. Commissioner.
Thank you. And I won't belabor this because we had such a robust discussion yesterday at the workshop, but just to remind everybody and to frame for folks in the audience, we have gone through an extensive process of looking at the teacher evaluation, principal evaluation over the past months. First, SCORE put out a very comprehensive report. We got significant data back from 10 Cred at Vanderbilt, which had done a comprehensive survey of teachers and principals. And then we looked at the data across the state, the TCAP results, the value-added scores, and the observation results across the state, and put out our own report 2 weeks ago making recommendations for how to make the evaluation system stronger. And some of the recommendations that we make are things that include items that we can do ourselves within the department as a matter of policy. There are a couple of items related to data that will require legislative action, and then there are a few items that require the state board to act, and we brought those to your attention. And the ones that are before you today are the number of observations, and in particular attempting to differentiate between the teachers that are performing at a level 5 standard and the teachers that are performing at a level 1 standard, so we can ensure that the teachers that are struggling can get more feedback from their principals and other people in the district. The 15% academic achievement options, we recommended removal of some of the options from the list. Some of the options have led to evaluation scores coming back later than we would all want, and we want to make sure that the 15% options are not the holdup on getting the evaluation back. Comparable measures for non-tested grades and subjects. We talked about a handful of grade levels and subject areas where we believe that districts should have the ability to create an individual teacher effect score, and we think that will benefit students, and we think it will benefit teachers and administrators. The acceptable range of results, so to the extent that school districts and schools have differences between the observation scores and the quantifiable data, we are making a proposal on how we would define what's an acceptable deviation and what we're going to do to help retrain evaluators who are farthest from the acceptable norms. The professionalism rubric we recommended as really our only main change to the rubric itself, removal of some of the items from the professionalism section of the rubric. There were 10 indicators, and we think that 4 indicators will be fine. We think the rest were duplicative and probably unwieldy and taking up time and attention. The one that we didn't spend time and attention on yesterday, and I am happy to have Sarah or Paul talk about this if it's helpful, Knox County is proposing an alternate model for principal evaluation. So as you know, we have 3 alternate models that are in place across the state on teacher evaluation, and I feel like that is a good thing for the state. It's good for us to have multiple measures that we can look at and things that we can compare against each other. Knox County has put forward a very thoughtful proposal on how they would conduct principal evaluation in a way that's slightly different than the current state model. And it's our recommendation at the State Department that Knox County have the leeway to move forward with that model. It would still have to follow the state law, but it would allow them to use a different rubric and different tools and instruments that they think will be beneficial to their system. And I think we as a state could learn a fair amount from watching a district implement a slightly different principal evaluation model this year. It would give us something else to compare. But if people want to hear more of the details about that, I'm happy to call on Sarah or Paul to discuss or talk offline with anyone.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Questions or comments for Commissioner Mike?
As someone who served on the TEAC committee, I said this yesterday, but I'd like it to be on the record. These are extraordinarily outstanding improvements, and I commend the department and everyone, SCORE and everyone who had to, because we knew there were flaws in it. We knew we had to get, and there's still going to be things fleshed out. But you guys did a great job.
Thank you, Mike.
I just want to echo what Mike just said, but also really commend SCORE and the department for engaging stakeholders and teachers in this discussion. And I think what we have before us are some really good recommendations, and just want to thank both of you for that.
Good. Other comments or questions? Carol?
I just wanted to question, you said yesterday we would probably be having this on second reading via conference call. Do you have any idea about the timing for that?
We basically our intent here is to, get these changes in place so some of them can be actually implemented for the coming school year, the ones that don't require additional action. So what we will plan to do is have a second reading probably in about 2 weeks. We wanted to put these out so we can, have a chance for public comment, this kind of thing, see if there are things there that we've missed, but we believe that there are good recommendations and solid, and that but about 2 weeks, something like that. We'll be in touch with you to schedule that conference call. Okay, other comments? Well, just let me echo some of the comments that were made here. I think these are, I think, Tennessee is kind of leading the nation in terms of teacher evaluation. I think when we put this plan in place last year, we recognized that we were going to probably need to make some changes, some improvements in it as we gain some experience with it. And I think that a combination of what the department has done, what SCORE has done, what other folks have done here to develop these recommendations is just great, and I think are responsive to what we heard from teachers, principals, administrators across the state. So really significant improvements and a significant step in what we're trying to do here. Gary?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to comment that in light of this first year of teacher evaluations, it's really been gratifying to see the student achievement gains that we've seen this year that are really, really great. Some have double-digit gains in several areas.
Right. And for those of you in the audience, we spent better than an hour yesterday walking through these in detail, Commissioner, presenting them and having lots of opportunity for discussion. So it's not something we're moving very quickly on. It's something we've put a lot of time in and feel like we've got good recommendations to really understand what we're doing here. Is there a motion that we approve the recommendations on first reading? Got a motion? Got a second? Any further discussion, comments? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, Tennessee Early Learning Development Standards. Bobby.
Good morning.
Morning.
What you have before you are our proposed revisions to the Tennessee Developmental Early Learning Standards, or the 10ELDS. With the adoption of the Common Core standards, it was imperative that we look at our pre-K standards and to ensure alignment with the kindergarten Common Core, specifically in the areas of English language arts, which is in pre-K. We know that to be language and literacy, and also in the area of mathematics. We have proposed revisions for the 4-year-old standards only, because that's where we're starting with our proposed amendments. We'll be moving forward. We'll be looking at the birth to 3 standards this coming year. But we felt it was really critically important that our teachers, moving into this next school year, that our pre-K teachers start implementing these changes so that when those children move to kindergarten, they're ready for Common Core.
Okay. Questions? Comments? Any questions, comments? Is there a motion that we approve on first reading? Got a motion? Second? Got a second? So, okay, we got it. Okay. Any further questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Bobby. Okay, we'll now move to the action items on final reading. Most of these we have been through once before on first reading, so we will probably move fairly quickly on them. I'm also going to lump several of these together because they are related items. So let's take A and B together. And Heather, are you going to? You can talk about both A and B at the same time, and then we'll.
Yes. Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, A and B can be handled together because most of the revisions are quite similar in why we made the revisions. So just in review, we wanted to increase the qualified applicant pool for districts who wanted to fill these positions at a secondary level. And we actually did, per the request from first reading, take these to the Advisory Council on Teacher Education and Certification, and they passed there as well. So we had a request from several school districts, looked at our industry, and actually made these changes in relation to that. So we're not changing the certification or license they have to hold, just increasing the pool.
Right. Okay. Questions, comments? Is there a motion we approve A and B on final reading? Got a motion? Got a second? Got a second. Any questions? Okay, this requires a roll call vote, so Phyllis, if you could call the roll, please. Aye. Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you. Appreciate it, Heather. Okay, we'll now move to item C, approved high school courses. And Lynn?
Good morning.
Morning.
This is almost identical to what was approved on first reading. It is to place in board policy a listing of approved courses that the board has previously approved curriculum standards for. The only change between first and second reading is where we clarified in a marketing footnote that it would be not one credit, but not one course, but one credit of a core marketing education course substituting for the economics credit.
Okay. Any questions for Lynn? Is there a motion to approve on final reading? Got a motion, second. Any other discussion, questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate it. Okay, item D, Migrant Education Student Record Exchange Policies and Procedures Manual. Danielle.
I'm pinch hitting for Paula. Good morning. She presented this item at the last meeting on first reading, and so there's really been no change. Essentially, this opts us into the M6 interagency agreement with the Department of Education, which allows us to share information on migrant students coming from one district to another and also from other states.
Okay, any questions? Is there a motion to approve on final reading? Got a motion, second? Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, Danielle. Okay, Tennessee Learning Center Leadership Policy. Sarah.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is also on second reading and no change has been made, but it's simply with reference to the Learning Center Leader Policy that was passed in 2008. The language that we proposed in this change is very slight and really just to clarify the roles and responsibilities between the State Department, the State Board, and the on-site evaluation teams in approving leadership prep programs. So you'll see there, again, all this change does is to clarify that the first step is conditional approval through application to the Department of Education. The second step is an on-site evaluation performed by members of a review team. And then the third step is to submit to the State Board. The department will recommend for conditional approval or full approval. And again, this is really just to clarify the language in the policy so that it's clear who's responsible for what. We do, though, anticipate coming before you as part of our licensure review process and the program approval changes to make some more substantive changes to this policy. But again, we talked a little bit about that yesterday. I'm happy to go into more detail today again. But this policy change is really just to clarify the roles and responsibilities.
Okay. Questions?
Sarah, can you just remind us of the timeline that we talked about yesterday for all the licensure reviews and when you think we'll be dealing with program approvals?
Absolutely. So we're engaging in a very intensive process over the next 6 to 8 months to review and revise both licensure standards, and that's really the heaviest lift of the three big buckets that we'll be looking at. In conjunction with the licensure standards, though, we'll be looking at program approval processes as well as kind of the architecture of licensure, so how we issue, what types of licenses we issue, what the criteria is for renewal and possibly advancement. We anticipate bringing first reading changes to you on all three of those in January and then second reading in April of 2013.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Got a motion, second? Okay. Any questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, standards of professional learning. Paul?
Good morning.
Morning.
And just to review, on the second reading, the standards for professional learning were revised in 2011. They are switching from 12 standards down to 7, and there's really a great emphasis on collective development and growth and accountability for both teachers and leaders with these professional learning standards. So as a second reading.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Got a motion, second? Second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Good to have you part of the team here. Okay, we've removed item G and H from the agenda. We'll move to item I, which is the high school transition policy. David.
Thank you, Chair and members. As you may remember, or as you may recall, statute requires that we give 3 exams, 8th, 10th, and 11th grade, and traditionally we've used the Explore, Plan, and ACT as that battery of exams. Now, as you may recall from first reading, College Board has developed a battery of exams that are in parallel years. The Ready Step, the PSAT, and the SAT, they have developed benchmark numbers around those, and these numbers are incorporated as parallel numbers for college readiness within this policy. And we've also gone in to the high school policy and put in parallel numbers regarding things like graduation with distinction, graduating with honors, and those sorts of issues. I'll answer any questions you might have.
Okay, questions for David? Okay, David, I guess it's my understanding that the decision about whether you go with ACT or SAT, it would be made at the district level, the local school system level. Individual students don't make that decision. Is that?
Well, that's correct, but a student could also individually opt in. For instance, if they were choosing to go to a school that required SAT, for instance, they may choose to do both.
Okay. Any questions? Okay. Is there a motion to approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second? Okay. Any questions? Okay. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, David. We'll now move to item J. Sarah, teacher licensure praxis change.
Yes, and this is an item that we discussed in some detail at the last meeting, and this second reading does represent a change from first reading based on that discussion and subsequent discussions that we've had with the advisory committee on teacher preparation and certification as well. We talked briefly about this yesterday at the workshop, but just to reiterate, again, as you know, the state board is charged with prescribing which tests are required for the initial bar of entry and that apprentice license that we issue through the Department of Education. We have traditionally used the praxis examinations for that purpose, and what you have before you is related to several of those tests. There are a number, which you'll see in the chart that's attached to the item, that are up for what they call regeneration. And again, this means that these tests have been, the items have been reviewed, they have been substantively changed from the past iterations, and so are up for review for us as well in terms of where we set the pass score. In the first reading, we had gone ahead, as we have done with other praxis examinations in the past in Tennessee, and set that cut score at 1 standard deviation below the recommended cut score. That recommended cut score comes to us by way of, again, ETS, who creates these tests, a standard setting committee, multi-state standard setting committee that reviews and recommends a cut score for all of these examinations. Upon further review and discussion with both the board and the advisory committee, for these tests, we are recommending now that we accept that recommended cut score, And per our discussion at the last meeting, that is certainly our intent, and as we move forward to revise licensure standards, is to raise the rigor of all of our licensure policies. We do think that's an important step to take. It's going to require some thoughtful analysis of our data, careful work with our preparation institutes to make sure that we are ready for those kinds of significant changes. But the item before you does raise that cut score to that recommended level. It also does a couple other things that I would like to note as well. It drops the content essay exams for biology and physics, and that is really to provide consistency across the board for our secondary licensure areas. So all licensure areas in the secondary grades will now have 2 exams required as opposed to 3 in those 2 areas, biology and physics. And those will just be the principles of learning and teaching and the content knowledge exam. So that's an additional change that's also part of this item. I'm happy to take questions on this if there's further thoughts or discussion.
Any questions? So we did discuss this some in the workshop yesterday. Teresa?
I just have one question as it relates to the multi-state participation. Just out of interest, what other states are participating in this standard setting?
That's a great question. I don't know for sure how many, but my sense is because ETS has a presence in nearly all of the states that it really is a comprehensive set of state representatives. And I know we've participated in the past. I think it's on a rotating basis which states are actively participating, but it does canvass all the states that ETS services, so it's a wide range. I'm not sure the exact number.
Okay. I think, Carolyn?
I just wanted to ask when the new scores would be in effect.
This coming fall. So as the tests are available online, as soon as they're available, they will be required to pass at the approved level, and I believe that's in November.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Got a motion? Second. Okay. Any further discussion? I think you recognize, or certainly the board recognizes this as a significant step forward in improving the expectations that we have for new teachers coming into the classroom. So commend the department for coming forward with this recommendation. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Who's going to be responsible for informing Dick Ray of this change? Dick will be happy, very happy. He'll be dancing. Okay, let's move to a couple of items here on special education. K, L, and M are all special education items, and Gary, if you or Danielle can talk about those, I think we can lump those together.
I'll speak to K and L, and Janelle can speak to M. The 107th General Assembly approved Public Chapter 772, and it changed the title of the document that a student with disabilities who did not become eligible to receive a regular high school diploma would receive. In the current policy and rule, that document is called an IEP certificate. As a result of this legislation, the legislation changes the name to a special education diploma. So these changes in policy and in rule implements the law.
Okay. Danielle, any the program services rule?
Yes. Previously, a task force was convened to sort of help our current standards mesh with IDEA, and we had a public hearing, which is required by law. We received a few comments, but none of them were actually added into any changes between first and second reading, and so this is essentially to adopt by reference the provisions of IDEA into our current rules.
All right. Okay, any questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve K, L, and M? Got a motion? Got a second? Second. Okay.
I'm going to read a roll call on
yeah,
a couple.
Yeah, we'll. Okay, any further discussion? This requires a roll call, so Phyllis, if you could call the roll, please. Aye. Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move to a couple of BEP items, and Scott, if we could, let's talk about items N and O together, and we'll take those as one vote. So,
good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good to be with you this morning. We had some good and stimulating discussion at the workshop yesterday concerning the routineness of the BEP items, and I look forward to Mr. Edwards serving with the BEP Review Committee this year. We'll be able to bring some of these to the forefront.
We'll get all these questions answered.
Get all the questions answered.
Right.
Get our recommendations together for our report that will be submitted this November. So these are the routine items that, as were presented last year, with the 2.5% salary update to be included in the teacher and principal salaries.
And then item O is?
Item O then is the reported number for this year for the funded positions. It's an increase to $39,849. That's the substantive change.
Okay. Any questions for Scott on the two BEP items? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second. Okay. Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Scott. And we'll let you stay there to talk about this new important appointment to the BEP Review Committee.
Yes, sir. We've got a couple attrition issues, so we're looking to appoint some new members to the BEP Review Committee, and we're very excited that our own Mike Edwards has volunteered to be part of that committee. I welcome his fresh perspective and discussion.
Okay.
This committee will begin meeting next month in August. That's why we're asking you to approve this on final reading.
Yeah. Do we have a procedure for recall on these?
It might be a historic process.
Okay. Motion to approve. Got a motion. Second. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you. Now, Scott, we'll move to one of your important jobs, and that's dealing with school bus.
School bus. So this keeps us in alignment with the new current law that passed to amend to indeed allow for pictures and logos to be used in the advertising, where before it was just stark printing. I have spoken carefully with the safety inspectors, with the Department of Safety, and they say it is practice to make sure that nothing is interfering with other drivers' abilities to see the stop lights on the rear of the bus, and that typically there's nothing printed or posted on the rear of the bus to ensure public safety. So I would assume this will be taking place other places than the rear of the bus.
Okay. Any questions? Move to.
Are buses allowed to put interior signage, advertising?
This was dealing with the exterior advertising, this rule. I don't know that there's anything that's prohibiting the interior advertising at this point. I'll have to look that up and get back with you.
You know, it sounds pretty bad, but it's not a bad source of revenue to sell. You probably don't want Camel cigarettes in there, but or Falstaff beer, but at the same time.
I don't think historically there's been any advertising promoted on the inside. This was simply on the outside for public view. They weren't advertising directly to the children. They were advertising to the public.
Okay. Other questions, Gary?
We will need to review those national standards, look and see if there's a prohibition there. I'm not aware of any allowance in law for the provision that allows you to advertise, but I'm not sure there's a prohibition either. We'll look at that.
Okay, other questions? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second? Someplace? Yeah, got a second. Okay, this requires a roll call. So, Phyllis, if you could call the roll, please.
I should have brought this up because I have a little bit of problem with safety of the school buses and advertising on the side. I know that it's a legislative thing, but I do have a little bit of problem with advertising on the side of a bus with safety. So I'm abstaining.
Okay. Aye. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Admission enrollment of students, rule, NL.
This year, the legislature voted to change the date of enrollment for kindergarten students. It currently is September 30th, and that will still be in place for this current coming up school year, 2012-2013. In 2013-2014, though, the date will change to August 31st, and then in 2014-2015 and all years after that, it will be August the 15th. So our rule is just changing to comply with the new legislation.
Okay, is motion to approve? Second. Any questions, discussion? Okay, requires a roll call. Phyllis? Aye. Okay, the motion's carried, is approved. Okay, we'll now move to educator evaluation policy, non-public and charter schools. Sarah?
All right, I think this is my last item. This is also before you for actually first and final reading. It's something that we addressed for the 11-12 school year by way of a moratorium for non-publics and charter schools. But again, the basis of this item is that the first at the top statute applies to employees of LEAs. And so it does not cover non-public teachers or teachers in charter schools. And for the purpose of licensure, that the board requires positive evaluations for advancement from the apprentice to the professional license currently. So until such time as we have changed our licensure policies to reflect a more streamlined approach that would take into account some of these other situations like non-public school teachers and charters, again, the State Department and the board have met and recommend to you that we continue to allow non-public schools to use the framework which was used prior to 11-12 for evaluation. That does not include any quantitative components, again, because teachers in those schools aren't able to comply with the state test piece of our new evaluation system, so it's impossible for them to use the team model. So in the interim, while we're revising licensure policies, we would recommend that we continue that practice for another year and allow non-public teachers who are interested in advancing their licenses to be allowed to use that framework that was used prior to 11-12. For charters, it's a slightly different recommendation. Because they do have state tests, we would like to propose again that the commissioner have the authority to approve proposals from charter schools for evaluation purposes. Again, at the department level, we would review those charter proposals or evaluation proposals from charters to ensure that they were rigorous and aligned with the state standards for evaluation that we're using in all of our other public schools. But again, both of these issues will come back before you as we make more changes to licensure. So this is a policy change that would be in effect for only 1 year. And I'm happy to take questions.
Questions? Any questions? Okay, is there a motion to approve? Got a motion? Second? Second? Any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Sarah, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll now move to the charter school appeal items. Got 3 of them. We'll take them individually. Gary?
The first one is Excel Charter Academy. Excel applied to Metro Nashville Public Schools. You're in the document that you've read. You see the list of the committee that reviewed the application. The initial application did not meet standard in any of the 4 areas, partially met in 2. It was amended and reviewed again, and again it did not fully meet the standards that were required for approval. The committee unanimously recommended that the application be denied, and the Metro Board did so deny, and my recommendation is to uphold their action.
Okay, good. Any questions for Gary on Excel?
I just had a question on the population. This school was to address adult high school students, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is this the first one we've had in the charter application process that has been only adult students?
It's the first one that we've seen.
That we've seen.
As we looked at the adult high school process, there's a section of State Board rule that allows for students in an adult high school to generate funding through the BEP. So they would be funded, I think, on a 4 hours would be an ADM per day and 20-day month. And there's a process laid out in rule for them to draw down. They just need to work on their application, make it stronger, clarify their program of study they're going to present, I think, and if they're interested, they can certainly reapply.
Okay, other questions? Okay, is there a motion to approve Gary's recommendation to uphold the decision of the local system? Got a motion? Got a second? Second. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, Phyllis, if you could call the roll, please. Aye. Okay, the motion is approved. Let's go to item B, Great Hearts Academy Charter School Appeal. Gary?
The application, again, was first reviewed on initial application. In the write-up, you have the list of the committee there. And on the first review, they met 3 of the standards and partially met an organizational plan. On the amended application, the committee reviewed it and declared that they met all the standards, all 4 of the areas, and recommended it to be approved. The Office of Innovation listed some concerns. They're listed there in the write-up. And I think what I'd like to do is just kind of hit a few points and then take questions. But this recommendation is based on current law, and it's not based on past law. The law changed this year to allow charter schools to serve any student. So I keep that in mind. And essentially, this is an open enrollment school, a choice school. And it's not very different from, if it's different at all, from the other choice schools that Metro operates. And the law also does not dictate the location or place where it will serve any particular children or group of children. And the committee that reviewed this recommended it to be approved to the Metro Board. And I think the final point I would make is that the CMO has presented a viable application that's worthy of approval. When you look at this and make your decision, the recommendation that I have given you is that you would send it back to the Metro Board of Education with directions to approve it contingent upon some issues. One is that the applicants develop a diversity plan that mirrors the diversity requirements that Metro has for its other choice schools. And that 2, while it's not an option, it's just, we need to clarify that Great Hearts must employ licensed teachers. That's a Tennessee law requirement. And to clarify that Great Hearts is only being authorized through your action here to open for one school, applying for one. It's the position of the State Board that State Board staff that each charter applicant, each school to be open requires a separate application. So with that, there's my recommendation to you, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Okay, questions for Gary. Carolyn?
So, Gary, am I understanding that these 3 recommendations that you have, these contingencies, would be in part of the contract that Metro would have with Great Schools if it is remanded back to them and they chose to do a contract then?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions? Janet?
Dr. Nixon, I just had one question. Just to clarify, because I'm trying to keep reconciled in my mind. This application now is for 2013-14, But when we're recommending that the diversity plan, that would be the diversity plan that exists now,
Yes,
not necessarily 2013,
or the one that was in place whenever this is open.
when the application first went into place. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Lonnie?
Chairman, I want to make sure I understand Gary's recommendation. We know that they have to do two regardless. Is that correct?
Correct.
And we know that they can, that number three, they have to do that. There's no question. So I guess the only question is Greater Hartsville to develop a diversity plan that mirrors the plan, and that's really not a choice. Is that correct?
That's the way I see it.
So I guess my concern with this is why we're going to send it back with these. Why shouldn't we simply approve Greater Hearts Academy application, period? And I hate to see this not take place for that reason. I hate to see it delayed.
Well, that certainly is your option. The recommendations that I've made to you tried to clarify three of the major issues that were listed in the application.
That being the case, Mr. Chairman, I'd make the recommendation that the State Board of Education remand the decision back to the Metropolitan National Board of Public Education with instructions to approve Greater Hearts Academy's charter application.
Okay, we got a second now. That's with the stipulations that Gary has identified?
No.
No, it's
I
without.
think they're already in place, if I understood what I asked him. They don't have a choice but to employ licensed teachers. Correct? Yeah. They can only do one application, which is there, and they have to develop a diversity plan that meets the standards. Is that correct? So I don't know why we're going to delay it, I guess is my question.
Okay. Okay, additional, we got a motion and a second that to remand it with instructions to approve without any stipulations. Is that got it?
Yes,
got that right? Okay. Further discussion. Gary, any?
I have nothing else to add. I think we've said it all in the report, giving you all the information.
Mr. Chairman, one of the reasons I guess that bothers me is because Gary's report to us, the committee basically approved this 100%, and then it was turned down. That's what I don't understand, I guess.
Okay.
I need to ask a question. Just
Sure.
for one thing, next meeting, my name is going to have a silent Z at the front of it. I am changing my spelling of my name because now that you've thrown a wrinkle in this, I need to ask a couple of questions since I'm the first vote on the motion that we have before us, just so that I can get clear in my mind. I want to make sure that I'm very clear that if we vote to approve with this motion, that we're not weakening the position of the board, that, you know, that we're not sending it back and somehow we're weakening it. I mean, Dr. Nixon, I mean, either way, is it, I mean, because they're required, and I see what Mr. Roberts is saying, if they're required already, why are we being redundant and saying it again? But am I understanding that correctly?
The only question I have about redundancy is on the diversity plan. I think the other two are in law and our interpretation of law. In this recommendation that I have made, it would be to have a parallel process to what's used, to the process that's used in the other choice schools, not to go beyond and require a significant amount of other options. Absent that statement, I think that there's still open for debate as to what the diversity plan could look like.
Okay, so the first recommendation really is the one that weakens our position a little bit, if I understand you correctly, that there's still some subjectivity without that clarification.
That's
in your
my
opinion. Okay. And then I just want to get back on the date part again, because I know that's technical and we have legal counsel, so I yield to legal counsel for process. So for me, for the process piece, 2013-14 is the year. It's not a 2014-15, correct?
Danelle?
2014, by law, they can take a 1-year planning period if they so choose.
Okay, so it's not necessarily creating a new application period.
Correct.
Okay, I just needed to get that firm in my head. Okay, thank you.
Other comments, Carolyn?
I'd just like to make a comment that I do believe that the 3 items that Gary has identified for us are the things that seem to be under dispute. From all the communication that has been public and communications that we've received, these seem to be the areas where there are different opinions about what the law requires, what the statute requires, and where we stand on some of the charter issues. So I would think that we should maybe be as clear as possible in any action that we would take.
And if I could provide one more point of clarification, as far as the teacher licensing issues, in their application, they requested a waiver from the requirement of providing licensed teachers, and so by you making that action, you're denying their opportunity to have that waiver granted.
Do we have the power to waive that request?
Charters can request to waive a number of laws, and that is what makes them different from a regular school.
But do we have the power to waive?
There are a list of things in statute that cannot be waived. There is an additional point in the statute that says teachers in charter schools have to be licensed educators. They can request a waiver from that, but again, the statute says they have to be licensed teachers.
So they can request it, but we couldn't grant it if we wanted to.
Essentially, yes.
My comment is, just like committees are charged to do things, our staff is charged to do things, and they have certainly expertise to really look at things. And so I would say that I think that we ought to go with staff's recommendations.
And I think that while the 3 things that Gary has outlined are, pretty much got to happen, I think it needs to be very clear in our recommendation back to the local board that these 3 things have to happen. So, and I don't, Lonnie, you mentioned that it's going to delay it. I don't think that it's going to delay it. I don't see why it should delay it. It's a matter of approving it with these 3 things, and that Great Hearts would have to accept and work with. So I believe we need to be as specific as we can be on these 3 items, and would again support Gary's recommendation. Other comments, Teresa?
One issue we discussed yesterday was, if this is remanded back to the Nashville School District, at what point will they take action? And I know in the past we have asked that they take action at their next meeting of any district, not Nashville, but I'd like to ask that we include that in our recommendation.
Okay. Other comments?
That would help answer my question. My concern is delaying the process for another year or 2. That's my concern.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion. I'm sorry, Mike.
So your motion is still on the floor.
Yes.
Do you want to amend your motion to include a time frame, or without your motion doesn't require a time frame?
Well, my motion, I don't think my motion requires a time frame, but I don't mind adjusting if we are going to figure out a way to, if we send this back, that there'll be action taken on it. That's my concern. The way it's currently here today, there is no time frame. The way right, Gary?
Correct.
So if we want this done, again, I believe that at least 2 of the 3 things is a given. I mean, they have to do those 2 things regardless. It's a question of number 1. And I don't have a problem if somebody wants to change that motion to put a time frame in it and make it certain, then that will make it a lot more palatable to me.
Okay, I think we've got a choice here. We could withdraw the motion that is on the table and make a new motion if we want to do it that way, or we can go ahead and process the motion that's on the table and then have a new motion later.
I will withdraw my motion with the ability to come back and make another one.
Okay. And
Second,
that's
second
right.
withdraw.
Okay. Okay, then the new motion would be what?
My new motion would be to approve this, but to amend it that they have to take action on it at the next meeting of the board.
And the motion means approving the recommendations of the staff with the addition that they've got to take action by their next meeting.
Yeah.
Mike?
So, we vote positively on this motion. It goes to the school board, and they don't take action at the next meeting, or subsequently to. Where are we then?
Danielle?
To date, that has never happened. I believe that Metro Schools will be cooperative in working with Great Hearts in hashing out the issues that they have and going ahead and approving the application. If by chance they don't, I think that Great Hearts would have to go and pursue some sort of legal action. But what we're required to do in statute is what you're doing right now. After you make this vote, essentially we're out of it altogether.
It's law.
So, if we were to approve the original motion, then there is no action on the school board's part that could require legal action. If we vote on the, or is that correct?
No, they still have to. You all would be remanding it back to the board for approval. So they could still technically, hypothetically, not approve it, and then Great Hearts would still be in the same position of having to go and seek some sort of legal remedy. But again,
Either way,
yes.
I got it.
Okay, do we have a second to the new motion? Mike?
Second.
Second, okay. Okay, any further discussion? Are we, okay, Kevin?
This is less about the motion, but I do think that, and a letter was sent to the state board, and I was copied on it last night by Great Hearts. I do think that Great Hearts intended to apply for 5 schools. They seem not to have complied with the letter of the law in submitting 5 separate applications, and my hope would be that if this initial school is remanded for approval, that rather than wait a full year to take on the remaining 4 applications, given that Great Hearts really was intending to apply for 5 schools and didn't get much assistance in ensuring that they applied for 5 schools, I would hope that the Metro Nashville board would also put in place a process that would allow them to expedite approval of the remaining 4 schools.
Okay, good. Okay, further discussion. Okay, Carolyn?
Please just review for me the motion.
Okay, the motion is that we approve the recommendations from the staff. That is that remand decision to the local board with instructions to approve contingent on with the 3 stipulations that are in the recommendation. And that we add to that the board has to take action on it at their next meeting. Okay, clear on the motion? Okay, requires a roll call vote. Phyllis?
Ms. Aaron? Mr. Edwards? Ms. Perry? Mr. Roberts? Dr. Rogers? Mr. Roscoe?
Aye.
Ms. Sawyer? Dr. Wright?
The motion is carried. Appreciate the good discussion. Certainly appreciate Gary and Danielle's work with this, in an important issue, but a very complex issue. Okay, we'll next move to the Knoxville Charter Academy appeal. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On December 1st of 2010, Knox County Board approved the charter for the Knoxville Charter Academy. In this charter, there was a stipulation that the Knox County Board had the right and had the responsibility to approve the facility that the Knoxville Charter Academy would use. And that facility had to be approved by April 1 of the year in which the school was to open. And was to open initially in 2011. They failed to find a facility by April 1 of 2011. There was also language in the charter that allowed a year of extension and allowed them to go on into 2012. So the charter applicant would have to have Knox County's approval of a facility to operate in by April 1 of 2012 in order to open in the fall of 12. There was also a stipulation that if the charter had not admitted students by August the 30th of 2012, the charter expires. It's terminated. It was into the 15th month following December of 10 before the Knoxville Charter Academy brought a recommendation to the Knoxville Board. This recommendation was to operate in the West Knoxville area. The Knoxville Board denied the building in terms of location and so forth, but the Knoxville Charter Academy did not come back with another recommendation prior to the April 1 deadline. They requested instead for Knox County to amend the application to extend the deadline for approval, giving them another year to plan and to open. The Knox County Board did not approve the request, and that request was then appealed to the State Board. After reviewing this situation, my recommendation is to uphold Knox County Board's decision to not amend the application. The Knoxville Charter Academy certainly would have an opportunity to reapply once they found a facility.
Okay. Any questions for Gary on this charter school appeal? Question? Is there a motion to approve the recommendation? Got a motion? Second? Any discussion? Okay. Phyllis, call the roll, please. Aye. Okay, the motion is approved. Gary, appreciate all the good work on the charter school appeal, and Danielle also. Okay, the teacher revocation appeal items. There's Rich.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you all. You have before you an item where Mr. Payne requested a hearing before an administrative law judge sitting on behalf of the State Board. That administrative law judge rendered an initial order denying the State Board's motion to revoke Mr. Payne's license concurrent with his Georgia teaching license. The State Board staff attorney, Ms. Walker, appealed that decision to you all. You all have the authority now to issue a final order. You can either adopt in whole or in part the judge's initial order. You can enter a new final order with findings of fact and conclusions of law. And for that, you can ask either party to draft that for you, and then it will be signed by Mr. Ralston. And you can also remand the matter back to the administrative judge with specific instructions for further proceedings.
Okay. Is everybody clear on what alternatives we have here? Rich just confirmed that his Georgia license has been revoked.
He entered an order of voluntary surrender, and
Okay.
the State Board generally treats that the same as if it were a revocation.
Okay. And according to one page of the notes here, it's not only he ran into problems back a number of years ago and I don't have the date right in front of me, in the 1900s, but ran into additional problems with text messages and so forth in 2009. Yes,
and you'll want to look carefully at the judge's order in this case because the focus of this was that there was the concern about what exactly was alleged in the notice of a hearing and charges, and that the proceedings needed to be limited to that, and that's what part of what the argument is about, is what that was. And there, the judge pointed out in her initial order that it was quite narrow and limited to taking action based on his failure to disclose that earlier action on some employment applications in Georgia. That's what prompted the Georgia Board of Professional Standards to get involved and led to preceded the voluntary surrender.
I move approval of the staff recommendation.
Okay, and the staff recommendation is that we revoke license concurrent with the Georgia revocation, or which amounts to the revocation. Okay, got a second? Got a second? Any further discussion? Are we clear? Okay, everybody's clear. Okay, call roll, please. Phyllis? Aye. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it. Good to see you again.
You're welcome.
I guess you're glad to see that be back here in front of this board occasionally, right?
It is good.
You enjoyed the experience so much, you just can't stay away.
Exactly.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, we'll now move to the teacher license actions. We've got a number of those, and Danielle is going to present that.
You have before you the list of recommendations for licensing actions for the teachers listed. I'll be happy to take any questions on individuals listed.
Okay, any questions from Danielle on any of the licensure actions? Any questions? You might just, remind everybody that get a lot of these, the staff, I think, does an excellent job of reviewing these and making sure that the actions that are recommended taken here are consistent with previous actions that we've taken, and I think they do a really good job with it, and we depend very much on their recommendations. Okay, did we get a motion? We didn't, did we? Got a motion to approve. I got a second, Jean Ann. Okay, any further discussion, questions? Okay, Phyllis, if you could call the roll, please. Aye. Very good. Motion is approved. I think we're going to have to give Phyllis some extra compensation for all the roll call votes we've had today. This is, I believe we've set a record. That concludes our agenda. The next meeting is October the 19th, and we have set the meetings for 2013. The state board meetings will be on January the 31st, February the 1st, April the 19th, July the 26th, and October the 25th. It's the I said January 30. The board meeting will actually be on February the 1st. February the 1st, April 19th, July the 26th, and October the 25th. No further business. The meeting is adjourned. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Have to go to my next task force.
Okay.